Okay, so this is the agenda of our Angular training, what we have. Uh, so before I start with any one of these labs here and any one of these modules, right? I would like to ask everyone here, what have you heard about Angular? What is the use of Angular? Let me see if how many people can answer that properly. What is the main goal of Angular and why do we need Angular? If you want to answer, you need to go to the Q&A and put your answer saying that Angular is this, Angular is that. So let me get a pulse of this class, that what exactly is Angular. Yeah, I can see some answers. It is a JavaScript framework, a good WebAPI, but if you can be more specific, like JavaScript framework, but what more? Because jQuery is also framework, but what is the reason, right? So reason. Okay, I can see that most of them are answering it. So it is binding, definitely. It is binding HTML, not with JavaScript data. I think Suhit is answering properly. It is binding HTML with JavaScript objects. And yes, objects will provide data. So you can see that, there are a lot of answers here. Like Ajay said that binding between HTML and data. Suhit said binding JavaScript object with HTML UI. So this answer is more perfect because that again Ajay's answer is right. Only thing is that data over here is nothing but the object. Okay, good. I can see from Pallab, it is different framework basis on JavaScript. Yeah, but okay. So it's right. So Suhit and Ajay, you have answered properly. Let me just put down here. What Angular does is, it does the following. Okay, in a hindsight, let me if you go quickly, let me just go to Google. Let me open up Google here and let us go and search Angular JS. If you go to the Angular JS, you can see on the site over here, it says it is a MVW framework. MVW framework, what Suhit and Ajay answered. So what it means is that you have so MVW, right? So you have a view, that V stands for a view. You have a model, right? This model means JavaScript objects, classes, whatever you want to term. Now the model and the view needs some binding code to bind data. This binding code, some people term it as view model. Some people term this binding code as presenter. Some people term this binding code as behind code. Microsoft guys especially, they like this word behind code. Behind code is the code. So a lot of people have different names to this binding code. So what Angular has said, that this binding code is whatever name you want to keep for it, is that code which binds the view and the model. So you can see here Angular team clearly in their title of their site, it says that it is the MVW framework. Okay, MVW means this framework helps you to bind your model and view. Now definitely the view is HTML, the model is a JavaScript object, right? So it helps you to bind your model and the view. But now remember that Angular has become so famous that this it has come much beyond this MVW framework. So if you see Angular core, it still does MVW, but then after that people said, oh, we need grids also. So they created Angular grid. People said we want to do single page application, so they created single page application. So there are a lot of flavors of Angular, or I'll say that Angular framework was extended to do a lot of other things. For example, look at jQuery. Initially jQuery started with saying that okay, we will simplify the JavaScript code, we will be compatible in all browsers, but later on jQuery became very famous. So people said we wanted jQuery grid, we want jQuery UI, we want this, we want that. And after that jQuery also became big, right? So let us go back here. Let me start with some coding. Let me create a new project here. What I will do is, let me create an ASP.NET web application, and let us go ahead and start doing some Angular code, and let us try to understand that how this MVW framework is implemented. Okay, so you can see that over here I have a solution explorer. I have created a web application. I will delete this web config file. I don't need it. It's a very simple JavaScript project, right? So I'm going to go and add a new item here. So I will go and add an HTML page, and let us say this is my customer UI. Okay, let me make it HTML5. So for HTML5 you shouldn't be putting the DTD, right? Good. So this is my UI. I would like to first, let us say this UI has a customer code. So let us create a simple UI. You have a customer code here. So I'll say view toolbox, a text box here. I have a customer name. This actually have the customer name, and then must be I can have a amount and so on, right? So I have a UI here, where I have customer code, customer name, and customer amount. Let me go and wrap this UI into a div tag. I will say that this is my customer screen. So ID is equal to my customer screen, or I can say customer view. Great. Now this is my UI, and let us now go and create a JavaScript class, a JavaScript object. Okay, now again remember that even if you're doing JavaScript coding, please try to follow object-oriented programming with JavaScript. I have seen a lot of people, it is JavaScript, so just go ahead, create a function, alert, hello, hi. Don't do that. Remember that JavaScript is coming up like anything, and all your code which was first in code behind will now move to JavaScript in a form of Angular code. It can move in a form of jQuery code. So ensure that you organize your JavaScript code properly. Okay, so what I will do is, if this is a UI, let me go and create a class. Okay, now to create a class in JavaScript, we need to go and create a function. So I will go and create a new JS file. I will say this is customer.js. Now in JavaScript, we do not have the class keyword, right? So we have function. A function is nothing but a class. So I'll say this is my customer class, and it has 3 properties. Customer name, customer code, and customer amount. Right? This object, this class, I will say, it is not an object. This class, I want to go and bind with my UI. So this class, I want to go and bind with my UI. Okay. So first thing, if you don't have Angular, the way you will go, you will use customer.js here, and let us say you have a button click event. Right, click. So on this button click event, you will write something like this. Now remember, you want to bind your UI to the class, right? So you will create some function here called as bind data like this, and you will write some kind of a function like this: script function bind data. And in this I will say, first I will go and create the object of customer. So the way you create the object of customer is customer where cust obj is equal to new customer. Remember that this customer class is now in this customer.js. Okay, and over here now again, there will be actually be set data and there will be get data. So you need two functions, right? Set data will set from the UI to the object. So this set data will probably do something like this. You will say that whatever is in my UI, so document dot get element ID. I do understand you can use jQuery, right? But that's fine. At this moment I'm not loading jQuery here, but here I will say dot, so what is this customer name, ID. I don't have ID here, so I'll just put a ID is equal to txt cust name, right? So I will go and write such kind of a code that txt cust name, take the value of this, okay, and set it here. You remember, you can replace this with jQuery. So you will have such kind of a set object over here saying, okay, bind the customer code, same way bind the customer amount. So this will be cust code and this will be cust amount. And also when you say get data, right, get data will get the data from the UI, from the object to the UI. So over here I will do a control X of this, and oh, it works, huh? Look at that. Yeah, so alt works. So get data, what it will do is it will actually set the value of the text box. Okay, remember this is just a pseudocode, huh? I know that it will work, it will not work actually, but I'm just trying to make you understand that how much binding code you will actually write. So you can see I'm setting the value. So what happens is, if you do not use Angular or if you do not use any kind of binding framework, right, like Knockout or Angular, you will end up writing such kind of a code where you are moving from the UI object, you are moving to the, from the UI you are moving to the object, from object you are moving to the UI. What Angular tells you, Angular says you don't have to do any one of these things. I will take care of it. So remember, Angular is a binding framework. It binds the model. This is my model. With my view, this is my view. Okay, so Angular binds this model and the view. And this binding code is absolutely not needed. Angular will take care of it. So this code, what I've written here, is not needed. So what we will do now, in the rest part of the video or rest part of the training, my goal would be removing this code and binding that object to the UI over here, right? So any questions at least on the crux of what is Angular and why do we need it? So this binding code we are going to remove. That's the main goal of Angular, right? So any question at least on why do we need Angular? If you have any questions, you can go and type over here. So Angular helps you to bind the UI. Okay, customer.js, absolutely Suresh. So here is customer.js. Also, very quickly, people who are new to who are actually new to JavaScript object-oriented programming, what my honest suggestion would be, log into your Questpond video account and in this previous past 2 days, I have uploaded 2 videos on only JavaScript object oriented programming. So you can see that as soon as you log in, there are 2 videos over here which span approximately 1 hour. In that I have explained how in JavaScript you can do polymorphism, how you can do inheritance, how you can do abstraction, how you can do encapsulation. So I will not go into this, but this is a simple class in JavaScript at this moment. Right. So now let us go ahead. So I'm going to go now and get Angular. So now our goal is to remove this binding code what we have here, right? So I will go here. First thing I will get Angular. To get Angular, the easiest way is to get NuGet. So I'll go here to NuGet and say get me Angular JS. Currently I'm using 2010, but it should. Why doesn't it? NuGet is so bad. Angular JS. I hate 2010 now, but that was the easiest way to get. Okay, fine. So what I will do is, in case I'm not getting it from here, that's fine. Actually, you should get it from NuGet, but I will go and download using Angular JS. So Angular JS, let me do it from here. Hard way of doing it. Extremely hard way of doing it. Okay, very quickly again, now that I've come to this page here, you can see that there are 2 versions of Angular very quickly. One is the 1.x version. When I say 1.x means 1.2, 1.4, 1.5. So this is the left hand side. This is a stable version. It is there for almost 3 to 4 years now. And then the new one, which is there, Angular 2, which is currently in beta still, is there. So this is what is the upcoming framework. So what I'm going to do in this class, my goal is to cover Angular 1.x. Okay, so I'm going to go here and go to download Angular JS.x and download. Yep. I would suggest everyone that you first start with Angular 1.x. Do not start with 2.0 directly, even though 2.0 is way different. I do understand, but do not jump the gun. So must be first try Angular 1.x, get acquainted with it, and then try Angular 2.0, which is a new one, right? And remember that in live projects, if you're going live in your project, do not even attempt at this moment to use 2.0. This is my suggestion. Okay, let it stabilize, let the hype go off, let the reality come off, and then go ahead. Angular 1.x, I think a lot of people are using in production. It is stable, so I think there isn't any risk in using Angular 1.x. But 2.0 at this moment, avoid it for 6 to 8 months more. If you go to GitHub, you will see that there are still a lot of open issues in that. Okay, so I will go here and I will get Angular. So there it is. So I have Angular in my UI, right? Okay. So now that we have Angular, we have to start using it. Okay. First point number 1 to remember. Angular is how do you say it? It is a declarative language. Okay, means what? Now there are 2 kinds of languages. Okay, means from the syntax aspect, one is declarative, one is procedural or expressive. I don't know what word to use for that. Expressive means, for example, if I want to create a new customer object, I will say here where cust obj is equal to new customer, right? This is the way I do it using programmatically, right? If I'm in C# or JavaScript, whatever, I use the new keyword, right? In Angular, if you want to create an object and bind it, then you have to go and use their directive. You have to say here ng controller right, go and bind the customer object. So in Angular, what you have is, you have this directives here. These directives tell Angular what to do. Remember, in declarative programming or in directive programming, if you want to name it, you don't write actually the code. You actually go and specify a directive. For example, if I want to loop 10 times in JavaScript, I will say for int I, like this. But if it is declarative, right, then you will say for 2 times, loop 4 times, like this. For example, HTML is declarative. When you give a div tag, the div tag gets created, right? So this is declarative. So they have directives. These are termed as directives. So you will say in this when you say ng controller, then Angular knows that I need to go and create a customer object and bind it to this UI, that is this div tag. Okay. When I say here ng model, okay, if I say like this, let us say I will say here bind customer code over here. Remember, these are all properties of my class. Okay, I'm using the word class. I know that it is a function, but I'm still using the word class over here, right? Okay, so customer name I want to bind here, customer code I want to bind here, customer name I want to bind here, customer amount I want to bind here, and so on. So if you really ask what I've done here, if I go and write a pseudocode for this, it is as follows. This ng controller here does like this. This ng controller internally creates an object of customer and binds it. This is the JavaScript equivalent I'm typing here. This ng model over here and the other ng model over here internally means that customer code will be binded with the text box dot text. This is the equivalent code of it. It's a pseudocode, right? So ng controller does this, ng model does this. Now again, one more point, which is very noticeable here is, it has the word hyphen in between. You can see that there is ng hyphen model. They have not named it as ng model like this. They have not named it as ng controller like this. Why? HTML always comes up with new specifications. Today it is HTML5. Tomorrow it can be HTML6. Now what if tomorrow a tag comes as ng controller? What if HTML guys for some reason go and create a tag called as ng controller? If that is done, then Angular is completely gone, right? But HTML people want that framework should come in. So what they said that we will never create a tag or an attribute with the word hyphen in between. So if you see all the frameworks which come either from jQuery or either it comes from Knockout, they always have this hyphen. So hyphen means that HTML will not parse it. Okay, right? So good. So whenever browser finds this, he will not parse it. Okay, right? So I am binding customer object over here with the appropriate text boxes. Very nice, right? I would like to also go and display this UI value, right? So whatever is in the object, I want to display it out. So I would like to display what is typed in the customer code. I would like to display what is typed in the customer name, right? This curly brackets, what you see down below, are termed as expressions. Expression helps you to display data on the browser. So here the object is created, binded. Whenever I type something inside the object, that object data will get displayed right on the browser over here. So remember, ng model to set the property, ng controller to create the object and bind it, and expression to display the data. People who have worked with WPF, especially, just a small note here, people who have worked with WPF, they can easily correlate what I'm saying here. WPF also has such kind of binding, right? Like if you look at WPF, MVVM is the famous frame, is a most used framework because it has binding. So same kind of logic also Angular follows. Okay, good. So till here everything nice. So remember, second thing is expressions. Third thing is it has a hyphen, so will not collide. So no collision with HTML. Good. Now, so we are all set. Customer object is getting created, model is getting created, very nice, and I think we should be done with it, right? But there is a small problem here. I will just take this customer JS down. The problem is, or the question is, that if this ng controller creates an object, what is the scope of this object? Is it global? Is it private? How does it work? Because when you say an object is created, there should be some scope, right? So in Angular, the scope of this customer object is nothing but the start of the div tag and the end of the div tag. This will be the scope of this customer object, the start of the div tag and end of the div tag. Also, I would like to point to everyone here, ng controller, you don't need to decorate on div tags. It can be span tag also. It can be body also. Okay, just that div gives a nice segregation, so I've used div. But now if I go and create one more div tag like this, look at this. I'm creating one more div tag. I've copy pasted it. Now I have two div tags. In that I have two ng controllers. So what will happen is, there will be one instance which will get binded to the first div tag. There will be a second instance which will get binded to div 1. And both the scopes will be there, start of the div tag and end of the div tag. So in other words, whenever Angular creates an object, it also creates a scope. Okay. So that means that if you see at this moment, this customer object, if it gets created, it is using this scope. This means the current scope. If anyone who has done JavaScript here, this means the current context. Now, when you say that you are going to have two div tags and two scopes here, two objects, then this means what, right? So what Angular says, that I am giving you a ready-made object called as $scope. This is my object. This object will handle that scope management. So rather than using your this of JavaScript, use my object $scope, right? So with this $scope, which is a ready-made object given by JavaScript, your scope management will happen. Okay. Now, so good, scoping is handled, ng controller is there, ng model is there, everything is there. But we need some startup code to initialize the controller, to initialize everything, right? Also, before I move ahead, I missed one more point. Now, if you have two ng controllers, that means two scope objects over here inside, right? That means you have two here at this moment. I have two div tags, both have ng controllers. So there are two instances created. Both of these instances are having their own scopes, right? Good till here. But what if these two instances want to communicate to each other? They want to talk with each other. So for that, Angular has given something called as the ng app. This ng app, you can think about that it is like the main DOM of Angular. And all these controller objects will be created inside this ng app. I will go into more details of object creation later on. So internally, you can think at this moment, at the top, you have ng app, and then below you have ng controller creating different instances, right? I'm sorry for the diagram. And inside the controllers you have different ng models. You have models which binds to the property, right? And the instance of this and this is the div tags, the start of the div tag and the end of the div tag. Okay, good till here. So now that everything is decorated, all the directives are at place, we need to start. We need some kind of a kickoff code, startup code, static void main code. I don't know how do you name that code, which will say, okay, create the object of app, create the object of controller and start, right? So for that you need to go and call the Angular system. So for that I will say here, where my app Angular, please go and load the module my app. This my app is this over here. So load my app square bracket close, square bracket start. Now what is that? If you remember, I said Angular is meant for binding. The core work of Angular is binding, and binding, right? But then Angular also has a lot of third-party modules which are created, like grid, single page application, and some other components, tree view controls and all those, right? In case you want to load a third-party component, then over here you will say the name of the component, like ng grid. So at this moment I don't have a third-party component. I will just remove this. Okay. Also, this loads the app, but then who loads the controller, right? So I'll say here, yes, in this app, go and load the controller called as customer with customer. Remember, the name of the actual class is customer. So this is the actual name. But sometimes you want to say that, okay, it is customer here, but in the ng controller, I will use the word customer object. So what you can do is you can say here customer object. So this first string, first is the key and the second is the actual object. Okay, so at this moment I will keep them same. So in case you want the name of the controller to be different from the key, right? And let me run the UI. There it is. You can see now I had created two ng controllers. So there are two instances of the object binded with the first UI and with the second UI. And both of these instances are different. In other words, if I go and change here, I say that this is Raju. You can see Raju has been changed in the first UI, but it has not been changed in the second UI because inside every ng controller creates a new instance. Right? Right. So that was the first Angular application, where I have binded just by using the tags with my customer object. So any questions till here? Any questions on ng controller, ng model, expressions, app? If you have any questions, you can go and put on the Q&A box. Let me start with Q&A one by one. Remember, this is the base of Angular. If you miss the base of Angular, you have missed everything. If you miss ng controller, if you miss ng app, if you miss ng model and expression, you will never ever understand Angular. Remember, $scope, app, controller, expression and model. Okay. The top ones I have already answered. I'm going to go and delete them. These ones I have It's just the prerequisite. Okay, let us see that question. I'll just delete. Oh, not all. Okay, fine. Did I delete some questions, guys? I'm sorry for that. Please, okay. I think I deleted that TypeScript. Okay, just quickly, you do not need to know TypeScript for Angular. You do not need to know TypeScript for Angular. Okay. From Jafar here, my app.controller cust is not clear. Okay, so let me again talk Jafar over here. What is it? See, this customer class, I'm using the word class, so please excuse me for that. Because of my C# habit, I never see this function as a function. I always see this as a class, right? It is said, right, once a dog is always a dog, right? So I always see this customer as a class. So in this I'm saying load this customer class, and the name which you will refer down in the ng controller is customer. If I say customer key, it's just a name, then in the ng controller I have to put key. So if I want the name of the class and the name of my reference down in my ng controller tag to be different, I will use it. So this is a key and the object, key and the object. It's a key name, string name. I don't know, it's not a key actually, string name and object. Okay, so it's a good question, Ravi. I'll come to that. I will do that, Ravi. I will keep keep your question for halt. I know people love to do all these funny things, and I will show you what happens if I remove the scope. So let me take that question later on. What happens if a single object is assigned as a model in two different scopes? Single object is assigned as a model in two different scopes. Single object means you are saying, see, first thing, Murugendra, over here, remember, you never create the object. You are slave of Angular. In other words, when I put ng controller, Angular creates the object internally. So there is no way I can take this ng controller and assign it to this div tag. I do not have the control over it. So what you are saying over here, that can I take a single object and assign as a model in two different scopes? First thing, yes, you can do that. That you can do by using services, which I will talk later on. You can do that. You can create a global object. If I'm not wrong with your question, you can create a global object, right? And you can bind it. But at this moment, ng controller creates local instances and binds to the start of the div tag and ends of the div tag. So to answer your question shortly, it is services. We'll come to that in one of our lectures ahead. We are going to discuss about services and factory. So just hold out over there. Okay. We can go back. Can we use multiple controllers under ng app directive? You're already using it. I don't know. This is multiple. Oh, multiple controllers means you are saying you have supplier. Absolutely. Go ahead. You can just say controller and here is a supplier object, accounts and so on, right? You can. Okay, so we'll come to that. Biswajit, 3-layer architecture. Yes, can we have nested div tags and both of them have different controllers? Yes, you can have WebAPI, you can do that. I would suggest you WebAPI to do one thing. Just for that nested controllers, I would suggest you that already our Angular videos are completed. I would suggest you to go and see this lab 9 directly. There is a question here. What if I have a div inside a div? ng controller inside a ng controller, what will happen? So can you just go and see the dot rule controller as keyword lab 9? After this class, you can directly go to log into Questpond VD and see lab 9. Okay, so just to answer your question, but yes, you can do it. If you want more details, please go and see that video. I will cover that later on, but in case somebody is very excited and super excited, please go ahead. Okay, I'll come to that, Money. So let me go ahead with the course. I can see a lot of questions here, and I will answer all of them. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Okay, there was a question here that what will happen if you remove scope? Let us say I remove scope from here, and rather than scope I use this. Look at this. This will work actually, but two things will happen. Quickly, there was a question here. As usual, when developer says do this, remove this, fiddle around and see and write and have fun. So let us say I remove the dollar scope. Because this dollar scope does the scope management, so what will happen with this, right? So let us go back my UI, let us reload this. The first point you see here is that the default values have gone off. Means this is not here. This values, what you see, right, is not binded. What happened to them, right? But if I start typing, it works. So it is not that it is not working, it is working, but the default values have gone off, right? Now what I would do is, I will leave this thing as a homework to everyone. Why is this working without the dollar scope, right? So what you can do is, this I will leave as a homework. So first thing, it will work with dollar scope, but there is something very bad happening internally, right? Okay, let me answer the question, what will happen. Chalo, let me do that. So before I answer the question, before I go to the question there and I answer why it is working with without dollar scope and where did the default values go, let me go back to that diagram. Okay, let me tell you how internally Angular is working. So let me go here now. What happens internally in Angular? Okay, then we will go to that, how it is working without the dollar scope. So you have HTML code in the hard disk. In this HTML code, there are HTML and there are Angular tags with ng whatever ... So that HTML is having HTML code and it has Angular directives embedded inside HTML. Right now, when you load a website, the browser runs over the HTML and he creates his own document object model, which we term it as HTML DOM. So what happens here? At the top we have a document, then document has a form has text boxes and so on. So if everyone who has done HTML and jQuery, you will know what I'm saying. So in memory, when this is loaded in the browser goes and creates a DOM for you. At the top, document, then forms, then body or whatever, right? Now browser very well knows, browser follows HTML specification and he says, I am only responsible for HTML. I am not responsible for this ng hyphen, because this hyphen means that some other third party will do it, right? So what Angular says, yes, absolutely, it is my work. So first you complete your DOM. So once the DOM is completed, Angular runs on the top of this DOM, Angular framework, your angular.js, they run. And AngularJS hunts for his ng hyphen keywords. So he hunts for ng hyphen controller, he hunts for ng hyphen model, he hunts for ng hyphen. So he says, okay, I found ng hyphen app. The time he finds a ng hyphen app, he creates a top object called as root scope. Then he finds the ng hyphen controller. The time he finds a ng hyphen controller, he creates a scope object. He again moves ahead. He again finds one more ng hyphen controller. In our code now, we have two ng hyphen controllers. So he creates one more scope object. So in other words, when you are using Angular, you are dealing with two DOMs internally. already you have your HTML DOM, and on the top of it there is an Angular DOM. This Angular DOM is more simplified version of HTML DOM. Okay. Now what happens? So remember, in your code you write ng app, but internally the object created by Angular is root scope. In your code you write ng controller, internally the object created is scope. So the variables are named like this. Now if you see here, I will reload this. First I will do with the scope. So let me go here and put a scope object and let us see. I have loaded with the scope. I will do F12. Now as a developer you would be curious. You would be curious to say that show me the root scope, show me the scope while I debug. You know what will happen. For example, in a real project you will have lot of ng controllers, lot of ng models. So you would like to get an idea that how many objects are created internally, because you can't debug, right? Remember, you cannot debug directive programming, right? So there is something called as a Batarang tool. Batarang tool, right? So you can see in the Chrome there is an extension called as the Batarang tool. So I will go and enable this. This tool, it is free tool. Go to the Chrome extensions and get this tool. In this you will get scopes. You can see it is now telling me for that ng app there is a root scope object, this one. First thing, every object of Angular has an ID value. You can see $ID1, then you can see $ID2 and the values, and $ID3, right? When I go and change here, he does not change that other object, he changes the first object. Okay, so remember, internally Angular has a DOM. This DOM is the person who does the binding internally. Okay, now the question is what happens if there is no scope? So what happened over here? Now look at this. I'll reload this. Now I'm using the this keyword, right? If I go now to the customer, can you see? There is no customer name, customer code inside it. That means the binding never happened. That customer object is not binded. But now what happens is when I start typing customer code, watch there. Everyone watch on that screen. When I start typing customer code, you can see the customer code gets auto created. This is not the behavior of Angular, this is the behavior of JavaScript. In JavaScript, you can just, you can say var x is equal to 10, the variable gets created. But if you just say x is equal to 10, it gets created, right? That's how JavaScript works. So following the JavaScript rule, he creates the objects internally. But this object, what is created now is not this object. This is not this. This is that. I hope everybody is following what I'm saying, right? But when I say $scope, then things are different. It is created by Angular. It is done by Angular. He governs it. Okay. So that was a long answer for somebody's question over there, that what happens. Right. Any questions, guys, till here? ng controller, ng model, $scope, root scope. Right. Any questions? You can go and put in the Q&A box. Yeah, I can Batarang. I don't know how to spell it. Batarang tool. So you have to go to settings and you have to go to, if you want to get the Batarang tool, you have to go to extensions. In the extensions, go and get more extensions. Go to Google Web Store Chrome store and say Batarang, right? So, and I say enter. We also have got Batman and install the first version. It has a very low rating, but install that because that is more stable. Okay, so go and search Batarang and you get that and you install it. Okay, great. So I hope that answers the question where to get Batarang. Okay, lot of questions. So guys, we'll do one thing now. Okay, put down your questions because I've been speaking for an hour now. Let me take a break of 10-15 minutes. Let us come back and let us then restart the class. See. So thanks. Knockout out. Okay, question from Murugendra here. Okay, how two different objects will communicate? Mani sir, they will communicate via ng app using root scope. Let me answer one by one. Knockout, I believe, supported binding to comment tags. Supported binding instead of it does, and I support that. Yes, it does. I'll come to that, Murugendra. Yes, it does. Can we communicate between two controllers? Yeah. Can we have communication? Okay. I don't know. I'm not able to read this question. What is the name of this? Batarang. I've said it again. It's on my screen as well. Okay. Should customer class and JS be the same as controller? Very good question, Khare sir. That should the customer class and JS? I don't know what the question is. Hang on. Yes. Okay. So Sweet sir is okay. So actually, this is a good question. I can see that even Sweet sir has answered over here. It is not necessary for the customer class. I'll come to this, Khare. You know, already the question is answered down below by Sweet sir. But let me come back to this question. The next demonstration will be around this question. I'll come to that. Okay, how can I use CRUD operation in Angular JS as a real life scenario? So CRUD, see, Angular JS is a JavaScript library, right? He does not do any kind of insert to database. If you want to insert to SQL server, you have to call to the server and server will do it. Okay. Okay, I don't know why I'm not able to select it. You need to call to server using $HTTP. Yes, there are other tools than Batarang. So we will talk about that, Mani sir, later on. So there is something called as Angular Digest, HD Digest, or Hood Digest. I like this Hood, HUD. Okay, so let us go back. Actually, there was a question here saying that can the customer class and the Angular JS be separate? Means what? Khare sir, please correct me if that was the question. See, what does it mean actually? Look at this customer class. Look at this customer function. This customer function over here is now mixed up with Angular. Means I can never use this customer class like this in my life now as a simple JavaScript object. As a good developer, I would like to decouple the Angular framework from my core JavaScript objects. Means what? Means I want my JavaScript object to be clean like this. I do not want this $scope getting mixed up, because if $scope gets mixed up and tomorrow If Angular is no more there and something else comes up, look at Knockout. Previously we had Knockout and now it is Angular, and tomorrow it is something else. So I cannot muddle, or I cannot make dirty my JavaScript objects like this, isn't it? Right? So I need to find a clean way where I need to separate my JavaScript objects from the Angular code. And remember, it is a MVW binding, right? MVW framework. That means my model at this moment is a customer. Yes. My view is my HTML, which is there. But I don't have a whatever code at this moment. I don't have a separate binding code. That my customer was becoming the binder himself, which is very bad. My customer class was becoming the binder. So what I should do now is, I will say, yes, let me go and create a separate binder function. I will name this as binder. This binder class, I'm again using the word class, excuse me, will have a model inside it. And he will create the customer object. And down below, I will say, register now the binder. Look at it. If you see my framework now, what I'm trying to do, I have my customer class of JavaScript, I have my UI, and in between we have the binder class which binds with the UI, and he references Angular, not this guy. This guy is completely decoupled from here, right? I want to protect my business objects, right? So there it is. So that means that this is no more ng controller, it is a binder. I will delete this div tag. And here it is no more customer code, it is model.customer code. It is model.customer. It is model.customer amount. It is model.model. And the beauty of this architecture is, this is just a beginning, okay, of creating good Angular code, is that this model can be anything. Tomorrow it can be supplier, who cares? Look at my thought process. So what do I mean? What I mean over here is that basically I would like to separate my binding code, my core JavaScript classes from Angular, right? So if I run this, the output is same. You can see the output is same, but internally I have a separate layer of customer.js. I have a separate layer of binder, which is having Angular references, and I have a separate layer of UI, right? So any question on this architecture, what I just discussed? MVW, this is your whatever code. Whatever name you want to give, presenter, view model, behind code, whatever you want to name it, name it. Any questions? Yes. I can't see any questions here. Okay, this video will be uploaded today? Durga sir, first thing, let me tell you guys, we have wonderful videos of Angular already, right? This training, the goal of this training is to kickstart Angular. I want you to kickstart Angular. I want you to learn Angular, right? So remember that we already have 10 videos which spans across approximately 7.5 hours. 7.5 hours of videos, right? Almost 8 hours of videos we have. So I would suggest to go through them. Still, we will try to get the recordings. As you can see that I am recording the video, but I would suggest rather than this video. In this video, I'm also talking about doubts, I'm talking about problems, so your learning curve will be a bit higher. So go and see the videos what we have in Questpond VD. They are much better as compared to the recording what I'm showing now. So yes, we'll try to get the recordings. Yes, definitely. Is the model property a standard property? No, you can use anything. I can use business object. Very good question, Ajay. You are trying to move in the right direction. You can see there's a question from Ajay saying that, is it possible that we separate the object creation to a separate file? Means what? A very nice question. Can I say here, take up any model, inject any model, I don't know which model it is, like this. Can we do that? Yes, you can do that by using services and factory. So I can say here, my app dot service. In this any model variable, inject customer. Dependency injection. There was a very wonderful question here. Can we get rid of the remove keyword, new keyword, so that this binder says that anything can come in and I will bind it for you, right? And this will again work. So if I do a control F5, you can see again my code is working. But this time my binder is very, very generic. Remember, it is very important to understand everybody can do Angular coding, but everybody cannot do good Angular coding. And that's what this services is doing here. This service actually comes and injects in this any model the customer object. So hope that answers the question, Ajay. I don't know, I'm not able to see. Oh, you have to select to see the data. Please check with admin. I'm not getting, when I select this, why don't I see it? Some question I cannot see. Okay. Right. Good. Any questions, guys, over here? Any queries? So very quickly, let me look at the agenda here. I want to just see that what we have completed. We completed $scope, root scope, controllers, models, and expression. We completed services because somebody asked a question. So I completed services as well. And other things are pending. Okay. We'll see that. Right. Any questions? How will the service change? I can see some questions. I know I cannot read. I don't know why. How will the service change when we have multiple objects? See, multiple object means you will have any model 1. Then you will say here any model 1 inject supplier. And this can be on runtime. Please note this. I can, if something is this, then run this. So this I can inject situationally. Okay, this I can inject situationally. So I can do that, what I've done now. You can inject any number of parameters there. So you have to just call the service again. Call the app.service again. Okay. Can we put the Angular code in a separate JS file? Yes, you can always go and put this binder.js into, normally people have the app start.js. I don't know if you've ever seen in a lot of places. So actually in the app start.js, they put all this code. Yes, you can. Now see, once I have given you idea of dependency injection, you can go ahead and do the way you want to do the architecture. Okay, so that I will leave it to you. But now there is a catch here of the service. Let me go one step ahead. This service is a service, means look at this. What I'm doing now, I have created two ng controllers. So if I've created two ng controllers, I should get two instances, different instances. But remember, now I'm using a service. Now look at this. What do you see? You see that there is one big global object. This is not like our first behavior, right? So making the statement complete. When you use myapp.service, it injects a singleton object. When you inject myapp.service, it injects a global object. So service should be used for classes like utility, logger. So if you have a logger class, a utility class, which is global throughout the page, service is good. Service is not good for business objects like customer, supplier. Service is not good for that. Okay. So any question on what is this service? So remember, service you should use for logger objects. Okay, I'll come to other questions. Okay, I'll come to custom controls. We have something called as directives. So I'll come to that, directives, and for events we have ng-click. We also have something called as emit. So all is there, Mugendra, in the list. Are we creating all controllers under my app and it referred as ng app, and a page can have only one ng app? Do we need to create all control under my app? Yes. So answering Hari Krishna, first thing, there can be only one app. Like in this case, it is ng app. And inside the ng app, multiple controllers are created. So that is done by Angular himself. So answering your question, yes, in a page, you can have only one ng app, and in that you need to create all the controllers. You cannot have multiple ng app. Okay, difference between service and factory. I don't know. I was expecting someone to ask me that if this is a global object, how do I insert customer? I was expecting that question, because this is not, understood for utility you will use service, but what if it's a customer? See now what happens. Something like this can happen for a customer. Look at this. Let me do like this. This dot validate. I'll say a function. Alert, I am customer. What I will do is, I will go here in my ng click, in the button click, in the ng click, I will say call validate method. Remember, you cannot use on-click events of JavaScript. You have to go through ng-click, ng-events of Angular, right? If you see over here now, what will happen is, if I reload this, I will be able to invoke. What happened? Okay, F12. Strange. ng-click model.validate. Model.validate, not validate. There it is. I am a customer. Good. Now let us say there are multiple types of customer. So this is one type of customer I have here. Okay, somebody says, let me create one more customer called as customer inherited. In this customer inherited, in this validate, I will say this dot validate I am customer inherited. Now the customer inherited will get all the properties of customer. So what I will do here, I will say that means this customer inherited will get all the properties of customer. Inheritance. Inheritance in JavaScript is done by prototype. So I'll say prototype is equal to new customer, get all the properties of customer, but the validate will have an alert I am customer inherited. This is how inheritance is done in JavaScript. We do not have a how do you say inheritance symbol. We have to say prototype. Okay. Now look at this scenario here. I have two different types of customer. One is a customer, one is customer inherited. Now I want to do dependency injection. I want to say that if you give me one, I will give you customer. I will inject customer. If you give me two, I will inject customer inherited. That means I need to create a factory. In this factory, I will say where now remember this code what I'm writing now. The code what I'm going to now write is termed as closures in JavaScript. Now in this video I will not talk about closures. Please go and see the video of Learn JavaScript Programming in 1 hour object-oriented programming where I've talked about closures. So for now try to understand this syntax. So I'll say okay, this is create is equal to function, right? In this I will say take the type, right? And I will say if type is equal to customer, I will give you customer object. This is your factory pattern. This is factory pattern in JavaScript. Else I will give you customer inherited. If you ask me, utility objects, logger objects, global classes can be injected via service, but a business object should be injected via a factory like this. So what here we can say now, we can say rather than a service, I will say inject a factory. So I'll say this is a factory. This factory will decide dot create. You want a customer or you want what? So if I say customer, look at this. In the previous case, when I said app.service, he was directly creating a global object and injecting. In this case, when I'm saying app.factory, so inside this factory, when I'm going to go and inject this factory, it will not go and inject an instance. It will inject a delegate, a function to a pointer. And that function to a pointer is now calling the create. And he will say, okay, so what do you want? You want customer? I will give you customer. If you say customer new, I will give you that inherited customer. So if you see now look at this. Now, errors, F12. How do you identify there are errors in Angular? When you start seeing these expressions. These expressions over here indicate Angular is not able to parse it. And the best way to see an error in Angular is by using Chrome. Don't even think about other browsers like Internet Explorer or any other browser. Chrome is the king when it comes to debugging Angular. Okay. So I'll go to the console and see what it is. Dot get. Oh. Return. Now people who know closures would know that what that error is, but for now I will not go into that. Let me try with this. Ah. Something wrong in my code there. Let me go and open my code. Let me, guys, give me 2 minutes. I think I'm messing up my code here. Okay, let me get the 8th edition. Just for everyone here, I've released my 8th edition of .NET interview questions. So, let me get the source code. Sometimes it is very difficult to remember all the syntaxes. Variable name is wrong. Var underscore create. I didn't get it. Oh, you mean to say, oh, the C is capital. Oh gosh, thank you very much. Yeah, so I was right. You know, at the age of 40, 41, all these things happen. So this C is capital. Oh, you should have said me, not variable name is wrong. You should have said me the method name is wrong. Okay. Okay, so I think that should work. Oh no, it is not. Why is it factory? My type equal to type. What is wrong in this? Okay, let me use this. I don't like this syntax, but fine. I don't have options. I like that is okay. So let me take this. Okay, let me find. I am okay with using this syntax if it works. Let's say create. It's very strange. Actually, it should work, but not sure why. Check that. Okay, and here I will go and say this. I don't need all this now. This works. Copy paste works. So I don't know, that should have also worked. It was a lengthy way of writing a closure. What I was writing is a lengthy way of writing a closure. Okay, so that should have also worked. I need to check out. This is a shortcut. I've said create and directly the code. I like the first syntax what I was doing, but I don't know what mistake I've done, right? But you can see here, first thing, these are different instances. You can see when I change here, he does not change. When I change here, he does not change, because now it is a factory. Previously it was a service, one global instance. You will use a service to inject singleton objects. Remember, Angular is everywhere. It is design pattern in Angular. Service is a singleton pattern. Factory is a factory pattern, right? So this is a factory. Now I can go here and change, say in the UI, I don't want customer, I want customer inherited. Look at this. If you see here, if I click, he is saying I am a customer, right? But now when I go and say reload, he is now saying I am customer inherited. You can see my UI now does not have to know at the backend you have factory customer, customer inherited. or you have customer. I have to just change from the factory here what object I want to inject. Factory pattern. Getting it? So remember, if it is a business object, you will use factory. If it is a global object like utility, you will use services. So answering that question which somebody asked here, what is the difference between service and factory? Service is a global instance. A global instance gets injected, while factory is situational, right? So situational means if this, then give some other object, else give some other object. Okay. Yeah, but okay. Variable name is wrong. I don't know what happened, Ravi. Must be. Okay. Guys, so any questions here on factory and services? So very quickly, what things we have covered till today? We have covered the following very quickly. We have covered dollar scope, dollar root scope, controller, models, expressions, services, and factory. Right? Digest cycle watchers, I will keep it for some time later, right? So next Saturday. Okay. So guys, any questions here on this part till whatever I've completed? Okay, because it's almost now 1.5 hours, so we'll try to answer now questions rather than taking up new topics. Okay. Any questions here? Yes. Okay, now what I want everyone, I'm going to give you a small homework over here, right? This is for the next Saturday. Remember, tomorrow we don't have any session. Now we have a session on the coming Saturday. Please go and see this Lab 8 video. How jQuery can be used with Angular. In your Questpond video account, log in and see Lab 8 video. Alright, and I would let us see that if you guys really do it, right? Lab 8, how to use jQuery with AngularJS. Let me see if how many people can do that, right? I'll tell you why I'm telling you to see this video. AngularJS is good. If you look at AngularJS, one of the things AngularJS is doing is he's creating his objects internally. Now tomorrow if I'm using JavaScript or jQuery or something else, how do I access this object, this root scope? How do I get access to this? How do I go and call a method from jQuery, right? So very typical question. So I would suggest everyone to go and see the jQuery AngularJS video before you come for the next Saturday, right? So that's just a homework. Yes. Any questions? Yes. Let us see. There are some questions I can see. Did not get that question, Ravi. Using Angular, start a small application using proper structure. Biswajit, see, I have started, just to answer your question, I have already started with a customer thing, right? I would suggest, Biswajit, that if you can go and see the lab 13, guys, just yesterday I uploaded lab 13. If anybody who is interested to see how to go and create a proper architecture using Angular, how to create a service, how to inject a constant, how to inject a provider, how to inject a factory, how to create a layered architecture, please go and see this video. Please go and see this video and see the video of JavaScript object-oriented programming. Remember, JavaScript is a very, very typical language, right? So you need to understand how it works. Okay, so I would suggest you to go and see these 3 videos. Is recently which I have uploaded, very much targeted towards C# developers to make you understand JavaScript and the architecture around JavaScript, right? One is regarding Angular, the second one is on JavaScript. So please go and see that. Biswajit, already in this code also, I'm trying to create architecture whatever I can in my limited time. Okay. Okay, so guys, thank you very much. It was a nice session. Yes, you need to define ng app. Okay. How is security handled? Okay. So Durga must be, we'll keep this question for the next time. I can see a lot of questions still coming up. Any performance? Yes, there is a performance. We need to talk about digest cycle. We'll talk about it, right? Yes, you can pass a function to JavaScript. You can say over here, name like this. You can see that. Then this becomes a constructor function. Okay, so thank you very much, guys. Today we'll stop here, right? Next class again we'll continue with Angular. Just try to stick with this class so that this will complete your Angular. So now only thing what you have to do is log in into Saturday over here and give your 1.5 hours, 2 hours to me, and whatever homework I tell you, do that homework, and I will see that your Angular gets completed. Okay, thank you so much, and meet you next Saturday same time. I'll also stop recording.